Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Hayakum Allah jami'an. Welcome to this episode of Exploring the Quran. We're going to start, inshallah, in this episode of exploring the longest surah in the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah. We finished the last lesson, alhamdulillah, in Surah Al-Fatiha. And Surah Al-Baqarah, like many of the surahs of the Quran, has several different names. And we're going to focus on the meanings of two of those names. Obviously, Surah Al-Baqarah is one of the names, but there's something in Surah Al-Baqarah which is different from what people might think. We have an idea. We know why it's named Surah Al-Baqarah, but there's actually a deeper meaning than what you might think, and we're going to explain that in a minute, inshallah ta'ala. Another name for it is a Zahra. We're going to mention the meaning of both of these names. Now, Surah Al-Baqarah, we all know because of the story of the Baqarah, of the cow, that they were ordered to slaughter. Bani Israel, they were ordered to slaughter the cow, and they kept asking all the questions, made it difficult for themselves. So this is the story that we all know, and that's why it was named Surah Al-Baqarah. However, what's meant by this story is not just to tell you an historical fact about their story with the cow, but what's meant by this is to show the importance of answering to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah commands us to do something, we say that we hear and that we obey. And this is the objective of this story. This is the moral of the story is for us to take from this and benefit from this as believers, the importance of following the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and saying we hear and we obey to the command without questioning. And this is the way of the believer. They hear the command of Allah, that they say sami'na wa ata'na, that we hear and we obey. Also from the names of the surah, Surah Al-Baqarah, is Az-Zahra. And the Zahra, the meaning of it in Arabic language is Al-Mudi'a, something which is, it's a light. It's a light along the path of guidance. And that's why it was called this, because it was a light. Surah Al-Baqarah is a light upon the path of guidance. And Surah Al-Baqarah is the surah with the most any detail in regard to the manhaj, or the methodology that the Muslim must follow in this life. And we'll give several examples for that, inshallah, in a bit, about this manhaj, the methodology of the Muslim in this life. But before, I want to mention some of the virtues of Surah Al-Baqarah. And the hadith that I'm going to share with you in Surah Al-Baqarah, amazing hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith is narrated in Sahih Muslim, he describes for us, and he orders us to read the Quran. Iqra al-Quran. Read the Quran. And what do you get in return when you read the Quran? You get a lot. But in this hadith, where he mentioned to ﷺ, فَإِنَّهُ يَأْتِي يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ شَفِيعًا لِأَصْحَابِهِ وَكَمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ as a shafi', as an interceder for the one who reads it. So it's one of the great ajr, one of the great rewards that we get when we read the Quran. But also, from the great reward that we get for reading the Quran, inshallah, is what's going to come in the hadith. To focus on particular surahs in the Quran. After he said, read the Quran, and then he said, اقرأوا الزهروين. The Zahra, we said, which is what? The one that is a light. He said, read the Zahrawain, I mean the two bright ones, which is Surah Al-Baqarah and Ali Imran. Focus on these two surahs. Read Surah Al-Baqarah, read Surah Ali Imran. He said, because verily they will come Yawm al-Qiyamah as if they were ghamamatan, as if they were two clouds, or ghayayatan, or if they were two shades, or he said if they were like two flocks of birds, two flocks of birds coming to do what? To hajjani, that they will be pleading and interceding for the one who recites them Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then he said at the end of the hadith, alayhi salatu wasalam, اقرأوا Surah Al-Baqarah, read Surah Al-Baqarah, فَإِنَّ أَخْذَهَا بَرَكَةً. Taking Surah Al-Baqarah, it's barakah, it's a source of blessing. وَتَرْكُهَا حَسْرًا, and leaving Surah Al-Baqarah is hasra. It is a great cause of grief. وَلَا تَسْتُطِيعُهَا الْبَطَلَ, and the magicians cannot handle it. It's too much for those who practice magic. They can't handle Surah Al-Baqarah. And I'm going to tell you an amazing story in a minute, inshallah ta'ala, about that. We talk about Ayatul Kursi and the power of that ayah and the power of Surah Al-Baqarah when it comes to those who practice magic. There's a hadith, another hadith, also in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ, when he said that the Quran will come Yawm al-Qiyamah wa ahlihi, and the people of the Quran. The Quran will come Yawm al-Qiyamah and the people of the Quran. What does it mean, the people of the Quran, Ahl al-Quran? He said, الَّذِينَ كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ بِهِ, those who acted upon it. If we want to be from Ahl al-Quran, we want to be from those who act on the Quran, then we have to be from those who act upon the teachings of the Quran. read the Quran. And he said, the people of the Quran, الَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ بِهِ وَكِرَامٌ قَوْمٌ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, and the people of the Quran, those who acted upon it. And in front of the Quran, he said, will be Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran. This hadith, this shows us the status of Surah Al-Baqarah as a surah. But there's several hadith which show us the status or the virtues of some of the ayat, some of the verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. When you look at Ayat al-Kursi, for example, the Prophet ﷺ, he described it as being the greatest surah of the Quran, the greatest ayah of the Quran. The greatest surah we mentioned before is what? Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Fatiha. And the greatest ayah in the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ, he said it's Ayat al-Kursi. And another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said there's nothing between you and entering Jannah. If you read Ayat al-Kursi after each salat, he said there's nothing between you and entering into the Jannah except for death. So you have a ticket, inshallah ta'ala, to Jannah when you read Ayat al-Kursi. An amazing story I told you to tell you about those who practice magic. There was a magician from Yemen who used to practice magic, and he would make the people believe, cause an illusion for them, working with the jinn, working with the shayateen, that he was stabbing himself in his stomach with knives. And the people, wow, this guy, he was able to do this magic. So a brother came in who had a strong relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he knew the power of Surah Al-Baqarah. And he started to read from Surah Al-Baqarah until the jinn, as the Prophet ﷺ said, they can't handle it. I was working in magic, they can't handle it. So they ran away. And as they ran away, what happened, the knives that he was pretending to stab himself with, they actually went into his stomach and ended up stabbing himself with both of the knives and injuring himself. He was in critical condition in the hospital. When he came to, he asked the jinn who used to help him, used to support him. He said, where were you? He said, you guys are always there for me. Why did you run away? And he said, someone came in and was reading Surah Al-Baqarah. And he said, I will never work with you guys again until you promise me you will get revenge. You'll get intiqam from that individual who was reading Surah Al-Baqarah. So they tried and they strived to get any revenge from this brother. At the end, after 6 months, they gave up. They said, we can never reach him. Why? So because he reads Ayat al-Kursi at the end of each prayer. Allah Akbar. Allah protected him with Ayat al-Kursi as he read it at the end of each prayer. And he would read it at night before he goes to bed and read in the morning when he wakes up. This is the way the believer always attached to this great ayah. We read it as the time the Prophet ﷺ told us to read it. And our morning adhkar and our evening adhkar, that we read it at night before we go to bed for protection, that we read it at the end of each prayer. This is how we need to focus on Ayat al-Kursi for ourselves and for our children. And it's very sad that we see some Muslim children who don't know Ayat al-Kursi. Every Muslim child should know Ayat al-Kursi well and know it good in order to have it be part of his life. Always attach and always have Ayat al-Kursi be part of his life. Also from the verses that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the virtue of is the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. And he said that the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, whoever reads them during the night, this we should read them before we go to bed at night. He said, whoever reads them at night, kafatahu, that they are sufficient for him. These last two verses. And what does it mean, kafatahu? The hadith that was narrated in Sahih Bukhari, and the great scholar Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, rahimahullah ta'ala, who explained Sahih Bukhari in his famous book Fath al-Bari, he said that what's meant by kafatahu, what's meant by that they are sufficient for him, he said that either it means that they're sufficient in protection for him from all of the jinn and all of the mankind, or that they're sufficient for him when it comes to praying Qiyam al-Layl, or they're sufficient for him when it comes to the great reward that he will be getting for reading these verses. And perhaps they include all of those actually. So this is the great reward of reading, that they will be sufficient for you, inshallah ta'ala, from all of these things when you read them every night before you go to bed, inshallah ta'ala. When it comes to one of the things we said we're going to be talking about as we explore each individual surah, we said we're going to talk about the connection or the relationship between the beginning of the surah and the end of the surah. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the first ayah, but from the verses towards the beginning of the surah and one of the verses towards the end. If you look at the first characteristic that Allah mentions in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, he's talking about the muttaqeen, the pious believers. He said, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those who believe in the unseen. Those who believe in the unseen. And when you go to the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, the verse we just talked about, from the last two verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he mentioned آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه والمؤمنون. That the Rasul, the messenger, and the believers, they believe in that which has been sent down to them. كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله. All of them believe in Allah and His angels and His books and in His messengers. And all of these things here that are being mentioned, they are from the unseen as well, from the al-ghayb, the iman, the belief we have, and al-ghayb. So the beginning of the surah starts with this iman, with the unseen al-ghayb, and the end of the surah, we see it right here as well, talking about this iman as well. And this iman, al-iman bil-ghayb, the belief in the unseen, it is the core of the belief of the Muslim. And through this belief, the tranquility enters the heart of the believer, and it makes his iman strong, and it helps him be strong and have patience at the time when he needs patience, and he has the yaqeen, the certainty of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised. This is the power of this iman bil ghayb, with the unseen, and the impact that it has on the true believer. When you look at the main topic or the main theme of Surah Al-Baqarah, the main thing is talking about the istikhlaf or the khilafah upon the earth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives several examples. And then in the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to go into detail of different examples of the khilafah once it was established upon the earth. And then in the second juzu, is going to go into any detail and many things. Inshallah, we'll mention some of them in a minute if we have time. And inshallah, in the next episode if we run out of time. In the first juzu of Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions three examples, and He starts the surah, first of all, separating the people into three different categories: the mu'mineen, the kafirin, and the munafiqeen. The believers, the disbelievers, and then the hypocrites. So these are the three people that Allah divides in, and He gives the examples and talks about each one of them in some detail in the beginning of the surah. And then as He goes deeper into the juzu, He gives us the examples of three different types of khilafah which was established upon the earth. The first one being with our father Adam alayhi salam, and his example, and what he had and what he went through with his battle with shaitan and what happened in his story. And then the next example is the story of a implementation of khilafah which was a failed implementation, which was the implementation of the children of Israel, Bani Israel, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them from all of the khair of the dunya and all of the blessings of the dunya, but they disbelieved and they disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the difficulties that they went through and how they failed in their mission. And then the third example, as you go to the end, if you go to the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, the first juzu, in Surah Al-Baqarah you go to the end of the first juzu, you'll see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the example of a khilafah that was successful, that was correct, and that is that of the establishment of Islam that was established by Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the proper way to establish a religion as it was established by Ibrahim alayhi salam, and the examples that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. And something beautiful here, if you reflect on this, in the beginning, Allah gave us the example of the implementation of the khilafah, as He mentioned that He is putting upon the earth as a khalifa. And this khalifa who was put upon the earth, and all of us, this is our duty to establish. We're supposed to establish as human beings on earth. It's one of the objective of us being here is to establish what Allah wants us to establish, from establishing His religion and establishing good upon earth, establishing justice and building upon the earth. It's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from the human race on earth. So the first example was the example of Adam alayhi salam. And that's like an introduction. So it's an introduction, getting ready for that. It shows the khilaf. Okay, this is one of the objectives of us being here on the earth. This is the first try. Okay, this is what went wrong. This is how he fixed some of the stuff alayhi salatu wasalam when he repented, and give us his story and what we can benefit from his story. The second one was the failed mission, which was the mission of Bani Israel and how they turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They made things difficult, like they did in the story with the cow, as we talked about earlier, and how they disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala time and time again, and how they failed in their mission of establishing the khilafah upon earth. And then the third example Allah gives us is that of one of success, which is the one of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So if you go to the end of the verses, and perhaps you can do that tonight, go and reflect on the things that he did, the things that he said, and really beautiful, and things that pop into your head right now about establishing it, and those who are the zalimeen, that they won't be part of the mission. the importance of justice and establishing justice, the importance of making tazkiyah, and the importance of having tawheed, la ilaha illallah, and that's the methodologies you establish upon earth. Beautiful examples that Allah gives in the story of Ibrahim of what his message was and what he did to establish this khilafah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the second juz'u onward towards the end of the surah, Allah is going to go into detail about the methodology of the Muslim in all aspects of his life, in detail, on how we live our lives as Muslims, inshallah ta'ala. And then tomorrow, in the next episode, inshallah, we'll go into detail, starting from the second juz'u of Surah Al-Baqarah. And until then, Allah knows best. Allahu alam. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammad wa jazakumullahu khairan. See you guys tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.